All right. Thanks for the feedback, everybody. I don't know why the comments aren't showing up here, but I just turned my microphone on, and I'm assuming that's going to help with everything here. So I apologize for that, but I am now looking at my software that I'm using. Again, I'm trying something different today. Obviously, that didn't work for the first 6 minutes. Thank you guys for staying with me and being part of the webinar here today. So my name is Robert Wegner. I'll start. Chief Revenue Officer for BW&CO. We're a grant writing firm. The reason we wanted to have the webinar today is because we know that there's quite a few companies that will be applying for the NIH SBIR program for September 8th. If you're not in that camp and you're looking to apply for later applications, the next one coming up is January 5th. So this is designed to be an interactive webinar, and I think it's going to help if I'm able to have my microphone on and see your comments. So appreciate you guys flagging that. Yeah, I'll go through this. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, and I was doing a great job talking about that you guys weren't aware of because of my technical malfunctions, is this program and knowing what phase to apply for. So I'll jump in here. Again, if you have comments and questions, happy to dive into that specifically for you. But there's 3 options if you're submitting an initial application to the NIH. You can submit a phase 1, a direct to phase 2, or a fast track award, which is a combination phase 1 and phase 2. And one of the most common things that we are working with our clients to better understand is which phase or what type of project should you be applying for. And it really boils down to the nature of your specific aims. What are you trying to accomplish over what period of time with what amount of money? If you're applying for phase 1, you are doing a feasibility study. And generally speaking, in my mind, the way that this is built is you're building the prototype, you're testing the prototype, and then you're evaluating the data that was generated from that test, doing basic feasibility, knowing if you were to build a minimal viable product that it would work in a simulated or in a similar environment to where it would be should it end up in the market. Now we're talking across multiple industries here: medical device, pharmaceutical, diagnostic, AI as a software as a medical device, and other AI telehealth tools, or whatever the case may be. But generally that framework of creating a prototype, testing the prototype, and evaluating the data over a 12-month period with $320,000 is generally seen as a phase 1 project. If you want to dive into the specifics of, hey, I have this type of technology, what does that feasibility study look like, and what should I try to mirror? I always encourage our companies to find a similar award through NIH previously funded SBIRs. And so you can go to sbir.gov/awards. In fact, let's do a little bit of fact finding here. Since we're having an interactive webinar, you can go to this website, which is sbir.gov/awards. And you can find previously funded companies through here in their publicly available abstracts. So if you are looking at, let's just go to 2025, the last full fiscal year that we've had, and let's go to Health and Human Services. All right, and let's say that you're applying for, here's ACL. Say you're applying for technology similar to this. This is a phase 1 that was funded in 2025. They received just under $500,000 for this. And you can look at their publicly available abstract to figure out what their project was. This is not a great example. Let's go to phase 1 here. Yeah, so let's look at this one. This is a concept award. So you can look at these publicly available abstracts, figure out what the scope of work was funded. It looks like this was transitioning to a fast track here. But you can use this kind of process to be able to find similar funded companies with similar technology. And you can use some of the keywords and topics to be able to see how similar they are to you. And generally speaking, you'll find their specific aims kind of in the lower third of the abstract. And so this is generally speaking what they were trying to accomplish during the scope of work that was funded. So you can use this to be able to identify what your feasibility aims should be. And if they're similar, then my encouragement to you would be to apply for phase 1 or at least target that. The same goes for phase 2. For phase 2, it requires that you have done a recorded feasibility study that you can point back to and say, yes, we know that this works in a limited setting. We've done this type of testing and we know that it works on a ground level in a simulated environment. Now we want to take the technology, and what we're asking for phase 2 funding for is to optimize it and to get it out into the real world. Oftentimes this means clinical studies, clinical trials. It could mean, just getting a larger patient population, trying it out if it's an AI solution, whatever the case may be, but getting it to the masses and doing kind of a larger scale optimization testing. And the thought process is, we know it works in the lab, we know it works in a simulated environment. Now we're going to do some really early testing to see if it works in the actual patient population or in the actual environment that it will exist in once it's marketed. So that's the direct to phase 2. Again, you have to be able to show feasibility data in some effort, and basically say, if NIH would have given us a phase 1, we would have done this 12-month project. This is what we did on our own dime, and so now we're asking for a direct phase 2 to finish out the optimization. It's not uncommon. You can receive follow-on phase 2s, obviously, if you have a previous SBIR phase 1, but a direct phase 2 is a common application that you can submit if the TRL level is right. And there's a huge section, a 12-page section on commercialization on, okay, if you are able to accomplish this project, what does the future look like for you entering the market, addressing the market, entry to market, and going through that process. And so there's quite a bit in realization there. So you're submitting a research plan and a commercialization plan for that deadline. Now, the fast track application is a combination of those. So think of yourself as on the early side, you haven't built your technology or a product or an MVP so far and have it tested in some sort of feasibility manner. But you are looking forward to applying for $320,000 for phase 1 to do the feasibility testing, and then going through phase 2 to optimize it and then get to market shortly thereafter. There's a lot asked of a company going through a fast track award. And the biggest thing that we've seen is you want to be able to apply like you are nearing the end of your phase 1 or your feasibility study. So you typically will have more data than others that are in kind of your same life cycle. And you also it's really helpful to have either a team member or prior experience or a different product that's actually gone to market in a similar field. So for example, if I'm working with a diagnostic company that is marketing a device for a specific infectious disease and it's already in the market, and now they're coming to me and saying, hey, we want to use an SBIR to fund the development of this diagnostic for a new infectious disease. And it's the same commercial team that had the first indication. They know exactly what the FDA is going to require as much as possible because they have experience going through this process with a separate indication. Then it's worth a look to see if a fast track would be a good opportunity for them to be competitive, because they have the team expertise. They know what the future holds, so to speak, on what requirements are going to be there. And they can take all that into consideration and convince the SBIR reviewers that they're the right team for the project. So all this is kind of talking about what phase to apply for. Frankly, if you're trying to figure this out for September 8th, it's probably too late, and it's probably best of your time and effort to plan to apply on January 5th. And the main reason is about how to validate this phase selection. So once you determine, yes, I want to apply for phase 1, fast track, direct to phase 2, our encouragement is always to meet with the program officer for the specific institute and center that you're going to apply for, which we'll talk about here in a second. But you'll want to send them your specific aims and say, here's the scope of my project. Is this what you guys are looking for? You've done a little bit of your homework to find similar funded technologies in the scope of work that they got funded in the phase that you're targeting. You send it over to the program officer and have a meeting with them. We're going to see the largest number of applications go in September, on September 8th, 2 weeks from today. No doubt about that from our perspective, because this is the only solicitation that's been available for NIH SBIR since September 5th of last year. So the likelihood of getting a meeting with the program manager over the next 2 weeks is probably going to be pretty rare, unless you've already met with them and had some email correspondence. So if you are in the process of determining the phase, I would encourage you to really work on putting that application together for January 5th, unless you're ready to pull some all-nighters and get some confirmation from program officers. It's not required, but it's super helpful. At the end of the day, NIH is not going to fund you unless you're aligned with our priorities and you look like an NIH-funded company, which means that your specific aims fall in line with what they're looking for the phase that you're applying for. So that's high level about which phase to apply for and what whether to apply for a phase 1, fast track, or direct to phase 2 if this is your first application. If you have any questions, I am trying to track the comments and making sure I'm not missing any of those. So feel free to put that in the chat if you have any comments specifically about your project. So if you want to ask something that's more specific to your project for this upcoming solicitation, feel free to put that in here and we'll address that going forward. Let's look at this next section here about the funding allowances. So you'll see funding allowances for phase 1 are $323,000. Typically, it's 1 to 2 years. This really should say 12 months. That's most typical in terms of actually outlining the project. So I would expect to have specific aims around the 12-month time frame, although it does allow for up to 2 years. For phase 2, this is $2.153927 million. And typically 2 years can go all the way up to 3 years as well. So keep that in mind. That is the general guideline for SBIR funding across the board. There are a few institutes and centers where this guideline increases because of specific waivers that these institutes and centers are ponying up to be able to fund these projects at a larger scale. Some examples of that are the National Institute on Aging. You'll see that for phase 1, they have $700,000 as the upward limit for feasibility for phase 1 and $3 million for phase 2. And obviously the National Institute on Aging is largely targeting Alzheimer's disease and AD-related dementias. We'll talk about kind of the technologies that are of interest there here once we get to the institutes and centers. But just know that that's the initial waivers above the standard budget allowances. Okay, and there are a few other groups that will allow for upper limits waivers as well. You'll see the National Institute for General Medical Sciences, NIGMS, allows for phase 2B budgets up to $3 million or $4 million for strategic breakthrough awards. We'll talk about strategic breakthrough awards briefly here if anyone is planning to apply. If you're planning to apply for a strategic breakthrough award, go ahead and let me know in the comments and we can talk a little bit more about that mechanism as well. It's brand new. You are able to apply for September for that opportunity as well as January 5th. And you have to have a prior phase 2 to be eligible for that. National Cancer Institute also has a similar budget allowance similar to NIA, $700,000 for phase 1, $3 million for phase 2. And again, it's always good to check with the program officer for these institutes and centers. It's not required to get allocations within these waiver limits, but it is helpful just to make sure that you're aligned with their project and the scope of work that they're willing to fund. Okay, so a few examples of that. NIEHS is always an interesting one. The National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences have the highest success rates across the board from an institute and center perspective. So groups like National Cancer Institute, because of, even though they're one of the more well-funded groups, they receive a lot of applications, which drives the success rate pretty low. I believe, actually, let me double check this. Their success rates for the National Cancer Institute for phase 1 was 4.3% in 2025. And I believe the national average for phase 1 is sitting right around 8%. A lot of this information is in the data book for SBIR through NIH. I'll go actually pull that up. This is a fun website to look at. This is super high level summary data, but this will tell you what institutes and centers are receiving funding, the amount of applications that are coming through each year. You can see a pretty large increase even from 2024 to 2025. There's a few reasons for this hypothesis that we have, but you'll see quite a bit there. And then success rates by phase, and 8% was 2025, coming down from 10% and 16% just in 2023. So it's been cut in half because of the number of applications and the funds that are actually going towards later stage projects. I think that's a huge determining factor to that. So all that to say, we're talking about budget allowances, right? So NIEHS, even though NCI had a 4.3% budget or percent success rate, NIEHS had a 29.5% success rate on the national average. NIDA had a 28%, NIGMS had 24%. This is all in 2025. 2024, the highest institute center with the highest percent success rate was the National Institute for Minority Health and Health Disparities. So it changes each year. Obviously, all this data is casted back into the previous fiscal year. So it would be helpful to know which agencies are going to have a higher success rate going into the following year. But unfortunately, that's retroactive data. So one thing to note is these institutes and centers that have a significant amount of funding, National Cancer Institute, NIAID, which is the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Disease, National Institute on Aging, even NHLBI, all are the four most funded agencies through NIH, and they're very competitive. So alignment with those agencies is going to be a really important piece. Okay, good. I'm going to keep going through this executive summary. If you have any questions about your specific project, I don't see anything in the chat, which has been to my downfall when it comes to audio issues. But if you can flag it to me that if you have a specific question, happy to answer it, but we'll keep on rolling. So what you use the funding for, this is incredibly important. I have a lot of companies who are unfamiliar with the SBIR program, and they say, hey, our device is ready to go. We are looking to hire a sales team, marketing team, and we have a lot of risk around our commercialization strategy and how we're going to get to market. That is not what this is going to fund. Now, if you had a prior SBIR grant and you were looking to do a commercial readiness pilot program, that could fund that type of work, but that history is required for previous SBIR. So if you are in the early R&D stages, this is what this grant is really designed for. These funds support research and development towards a commercially viable product. Applying for phase 1, feasibility testing, phase 2, phase 2B, which is strategic breakthrough award as well, and the commercial readiness pilot can fund some of these scale-up clinical validation regulatory pathway. All right, I do have a question here. We would like to apply for AD with women's health perspective, including NeuroShe and Regen-She. Let's see if it says I can put this on the screen. There you go. Oh, well, it's got your email in it, so maybe we shouldn't do that. I apologize. Yeah, so it's a good question or a good statement. If there's a question specifically tied to it, let me know. Looks like that also may have been quite a bit before. Oh no, it's from 922. Okay. Let me stop here and answer these questions real quick. Sorry. Again, appreciate your willingness to work with me on this. So we have someone who is looking to apply for Alzheimer's disease or Alzheimer's related dementia with a women's health perspective specifically. So happy to answer if there's a specific question around here. But the things that I would target would be the National Institute on Aging, which is going to have a larger budget associated with it. And it doesn't necessarily explicitly include women's health. Let me actually go to the research topics here. So in our executive summary on our website, you'll see this information listed, and you'll see the updated information about what National Institute on Aging is looking for. At the end of the day, NIA is interested in proposals to develop and validate technologies that enhance the health and well-being of older adults. These trends are super important to realize that 2 years ago, NIA was funding mostly therapeutics and devices that were providing treatment for Alzheimer's disease. This last year, we've seen them fund later stage groups through phase 2s, fast tracks, and similar mechanisms that were largely focused on assistive technologies through AI, software as medical device, and other mechanisms. So it doesn't mean that they don't or only fund assistive technologies or therapeutics, but it is really important to make sure that you are meeting with the program officer to figure out where the alignment is. But you'll see here, there's a focus for innovative tools, technologies and interventions to prevent, treat, diagnose, monitor, or slow the progression. But there's not explicitly a women's health focus within National Institute on Aging. So that could be helpful to point out, but I would have a conversation with the program officer about how much the women's health aspect of your dementia-related technology is going to be required or beneficial. If it really is more of a women's health innovation than it is an Alzheimer's innovation, then I would actually encourage you to have a program manager meeting with the National Institute for Child Health and Human Development, which is largely focused on women's health, as well as child health. Now, this is, generally speaking, focused on women's health around pregnancy. So reproductive, fertility, the health of the woman during and after pregnancy, infant survival, gynecological health and disease. So large focus on women's health, but it just depends on where the innovation lies in the technology. If it's an innovative Alzheimer's disease, that's for women, great. If it's a innovative technology for women with benefit in Alzheimer's disease, you can see how that perspective might change in terms of who you apply for. So, so that's how I would go about that conversation with program officers. Meet with NIA, meet with NICHD, figure out where the best alignment fits, and then apply for that. At the end of the day, you're going to submit an application to the parent announcement, and it's going to go to the Institute and Center which makes the most sense based off of the reviewers' feedback and the initial CSR's office of where those applications are going to go. And so, so just keep that in mind, but meeting with the program manager is the best way to make sure that you're aligned with their priorities, and it's going to give you the best shot on goal to actually end up at that group. And it looks like our logo is covering NICHD. Don't want to get fined about that later, so I'll cover that. Next question here is about, is NIH, well, this one doesn't have any email information, so I'll put that up. Is this for medical/bio only? So if you mean medical devices in biotechnology, like therapeutics, diagnostics, the technical answer is no. This could be for assistive devices or assistive technologies, whether software related or not. It is ultimately looking to fund technologies that are going to benefit the health and wellness of the U.S. population and ultimately the world population later on. So it does have that. So we have a product that has medical applications, but we are targeting space systems. Oh, interesting. Let me see if I can open this link that you sent. InLikeFlynn.io. Let me see if I can open that. Again, this is live TV, everybody. Let's see here. And we're going to look like, if you are using this as a PR stunt to get your company in front of 6 users, congratulations, you just beat the system at no cost. So let's look at this. So Flynn is equipment anomaly detection software that runs on native MCU class equipment, observing sensor data in real time. It catches developing issues before they can cascade into catastrophe. 8,480 bytes of zero latency MCU class real-time equipment anomaly detection with zero weight SWAP-C footprint. Now, obviously, I understand all of that, he said sarcastically. This is not my area of expertise. So if this is largely used for space systems initially, it wouldn't be directly applicable to NIH through the SBIR program. Depending on how far along you're developed in this, you could look at other opportunities. If this is super early TRL and you're looking to do feasibility testing, I would look at NSF after understanding a little bit more about the application that you're doing this for. If it's already a ready solution, you have commercial traction, Department of War could be of interest. It's depending on the use cases there. Space systems, obviously, SpaceWorks, and a few different programs there. We do work with those programs, but we really understand where that's going to fit in. Now, to answer your question about how this could apply for HHS, you would have to describe what the medical applications of the technology would be. And I'll talk about the risk profile of what NIH likes to fund. Generally speaking, the SBIR program across the board is a de-risking mechanism. So you are saying, we want to go to market in this particular area, but there's a substantial amount of risk to see if our technology is even going to work in this case. So you want to be able to apply for the funding necessary to de-risk your technology for that application. And if it's used for medical devices, then medical devices and the pathway to de-risking for medical device is going to be what you're going to have to point out there. So I'm happy to learn a little bit more about the specifics for that group. If you want to put that in the chat or send me an email afterwards, happy to talk between you and our team to figure out the best route there. So let's continue working through some of this information here. Does NIH SBIR STTR fund clinical trials? Short answer is it can. There are groups that allow for clinical trial funding through the SBIR program and some that don't. So it's best to check with a specific program officer as well as read the parent announcement that's going to allow for that. I will say this is a recent update, but the parent announcement is this program right here or this particular website. This is the full announcement and clinical trial optional here, but it is going to be a specific request or notification from each individual institute and center to see if they're going to accept a clinical trial. So you want to make sure and check with them specifically on that. This is a lot of information to go through. Our executive summary helps boil this down, but if you are looking to get into the weeds of this, this is the best place to go here with the phase budgets allocated here, as you can see. So going back to this, what is the commercial readiness pilot? So if you have prior funding, CRP or prior SBIR funding, it's a late stage milestone driven award intended for companies that are close to market and need targeted non-dilutive funding to complete specific commercialization steps such as clinical trials, scale up, manufacturing, regulatory submissions, and others. Most NIH ICs and students and centers participate. CDC and FDA do not. We're offered CRP budgets and eligible use cases vary considerably by IC as shown above. Okay, and then I'll do some high-level overviews of these institutes and centers just to kind of show you what they're interested in. At the end of the day, you want to find the group that you have the most alignment with to have conversations with the program officers there to figure out how best to apply for that mechanism. Okay, so we'll start with the NCATS program. This is a very interesting one. There are a lot of companies that are innovating in artificial intelligence and how that's used in the preclinical drug discovery and drug development process. This is the place for a lot of those applications. If your technology utilizes AI, if you're in the organoid space, if you're in the substitution of animal studies space, and you have innovative technology to help forecast the predictability of whether a drug is going to make it through human testing, the NCATS program is a great place to have a conversation with the program officer there and to figure out alignment. They fund assistive technologies that center around preclinical drug discovery and development, biomedical, clinical, and health research informatics, clinical dissemination and implementation research, rare diseases, and unmet needs. So if you have a software that helps people enroll in clinical trials and it takes an innovative approach, uses AI, ML, whatever, could be a good place to go here. Now, the thing about when you're thinking of software, I always like to just put in perspective, these are high risk, high reward situations in which you are not really touching a commercial market until the product is fully built and implemented, which if you're using phase 1 and phase 2 money, you're looking at 2 to 3 years before you even touch the market with the technology that you're developing. So it needs to be high risk, deep tech solutions that are going through this mechanism. Not something that's vibe coded over the span of a couple of weeks. No shame to anybody, but that's what they're looking for. NCCIH doesn't receive a lot of love or funding, but it is for complementary health approaches. If you have innovative technologies that are helping people do yoga or physical therapy, loosely physical therapy, or just exercises in home, or you have dietary supplements, and these are not the combination of different ingredients, but innovation in a new technology, in a new ingredient that's patented. It's an important piece. Then there could be some opportunities for you to apply for this mechanism. National Cancer Institute, probably everyone is familiar with this group, is the largest funder of cancer research across the globe. Fun fact, we're here in Houston, Texas. The second largest funding organization for cancer research is CPRIT, the Cancer Prevention Research Institute of Texas. And shortly here in the next couple of months, most definitely within the next year, the vehicle for dementia will come out for Texas as well. Just side note, if you want to look up CPRIT later on, you have to be a for-profit for the product development focus. You have to be a company located here in Texas or be willing to move to Texas, move personnel, work with a clinical site here in Texas, have a PI here in Texas. There's 7 funding criteria that are all Texas related. You have to meet at least 4 of them. But if you're nationwide, you are eligible for the National Cancer Institute as long as you're a for-profit entity and fits within the SBIR program here. It really is funding any sort of technology around treatments, diagnostics, assistive technologies for these types of cancers that are listed here. Really, all cancers are, I would say, I don't know if there's a rare cancer here that's specifically stated. I think that's through a different group. NCAPS is also interested in rare diseases as well. But most of these large named cancers, breast, ovarian, glioblastoma, melanoma, things like that, are going to be of interest for NCI to fund. The one thing that I know about NCI is they are funding more later stage projects. They are looking for companies that have their targets identified and are going into animal studies, small animal studies, and doing preclinical work. So we've had several conversations with companies that we thought were further along and were good fits for NCI, but having a conversation with the program officers, we realized that they're actually looking more so than in the past. They're looking for companies that have the targets identified for their drug candidates and are looking to do animal studies. Now, if you're a device, that's not necessarily pertinent information for you, but if you're doing the therapeutic development, that's something to keep into consideration. National Eye Institute's an interesting one. Anything focused around diagnostic treatments, assistive devices for eye diseases. So you can look at some of these indications of interest. Generally speaking, in our executive summary, this is pulled directly from the SBIR topics of interest for NEI. And these indications of interest are pulled from the last 12 months of data regarding the specific indications that companies were funded to address. So as you can see, in the last year, in 2025, companies were funded that were addressing these particular indications. So if you're in age-related macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy, glaucoma, and a few other of these, myopia, then these are all going to be areas of focus that you can pursue and pursue funding for. National Human Genome Research Institute. This used to have a pretty high success rate. I think it's come down a little bit more so now. But as you can see, significant innovations in genomic methods or technology development. So sequencing technology, synthetic nucleic acid synthesis, and other spots within here. You're getting the picture where you're able to find institutes and centers that are going to share your prerogative. And the very first thing that you need to do is meet with the program officer to talk about how you can apply and how you can align with their funding priorities. National Heart, Lung, Blood Institute's well stated. National Institute on Aging we've talked about. NIAAA receives a good bit of funding for any sort of treatment options is really the highest focus there, and not so much diagnostic technologies, but there's a pretty high focus on treatments. NIAID, you'll see covers quite a bit of infectious disease across the board. You'll see some of the indications of interest for bacterial infections and antimicrobial resistance, fungal infections, viral infections, parasitic, autoimmune, and a few other here as well. So it's a pretty large scope of work of specific indications that they're looking in. Allergies, food allergies as well is included in that as well. NIAMS, the National Institute for Arthritis, Musculoskeletal and Skin Diseases, is also an area of focus here. Happy to go through these. If you guys have any specific questions, happy to answer those in the chat as well. I think I'm viewing the chat correctly. So if you are doing anything in regards to arthritis, anything in regards to osteoporosis, any sort of skin diseases, psoriasis is a huge one, where there's areas of focus here. There is some crossover for skin cancer, but I would meet, if you're in the skin cancer space, would probably have conversations with both NCI and NIAMS to figure out where the best alignment fits there. NIBIB, I like to call it the NSF of the NIH. If you have a high risk deep tech solution that you're looking to translate into a medical application, this is the place to do it. It's incredibly competitive. They don't have a huge budget and they touch a lot of different areas. So they receive a lot of applications, but you'll see that this really is cutting edge. This is the highest risk portfolio of institutes and centers. So imaging, devices, health informatics, diagnostics, bioengineering. Yeah, pretty broad group of essential technologies for things across the spectrum. NICHD we touched on, women's health, child's health. If you have autism screening tests, which I talked to a company the other day, that could be one here. All right, here's a question. Thanks for submitting this. See, as a small team of one right now, which I would say is the smallest team you can have, what are the best opportunities for starting out for the first time applicants looking at combining neuroscience and cybersecurity for health? Combining neuroscience and cybersecurity. Number one, would love to understand what that looks like more. But in terms, it sounds like the emphasis of your question is related around the size of your team. So this is probably a good time to talk about the grading criteria for these applications. For SBIR applications, there are 5 essential grading criteria. You have the innovation, the significance, the approach, and then you have your team and the environment. So as you're going through and preparing for an SBIR application, you're wanting to make sure that you're going to have a good score across all of those different metrics. So your significance, you need to make sure that it's clear that this matters. This is a real unmet need. The innovation, it's going to directly solve that problem. Your approach or your specific aims that you're asking for funding for are going to give you the testing and validation that you need to be able to say, yes, my technology does work to solve this significant problem. Your team, you have the right team to do it. It's not so much, and to answer your question, I'll dive into this here in a second. It's not so much the quantity of your team, but the quality of your team. The SBIR program is largely going to companies that, especially for NSF, that have a smaller quantity of team, but are really well qualified people. And I'll talk about that here in a second. And then the environment. Environment is probably, it's one of the ones that you can fix pretty easily by just getting the right contractors on your team and getting different people to sign letters of intent, letters of support to be on your team as well. If you're working with a CRO, if you're working with an institution like a STTR, those are all different options for that. But hyper-focusing on your team, it is an important grading criteria. Team and environment have been graded at kind of the same weight as the other 3, significance, innovation, and approach for the last several years, for most of the historical data that we have in the SBIR program. Up until last year, they've basically come out, the CSR has come out, the group that does the reviews, scientific reviews for these, Center for Scientific Reviews for these applications, and puts the reviewers together, the panels, and then processes all the applications. They basically came and said that they're going to lower the priority of specifically the team and the environment for several reasons, but to encourage smaller companies with maybe less people on their team that have some of that historical win data of lots of R1s, lots of R21s, and allow for some of these new and first-time applicants to receive these awards, right? So that's something that we'll still come out to see and see how that's actually implemented. That was September of last year, and we should see how that affects applications coming up here shortly. So all that to say, the environment that we're living in today is going to encourage teams like you to apply for this mechanism, but it doesn't mean that that you should be completely satisfied with a single person team, and you should still be working to make sure that you have the right people on your team. Because frankly, running a company, this looks like probably a software solution if it's combining neuroscience and cybersecurity for health. Again, I don't really know what this could be. You've done a great job of hiding the innovation for the 7 people in the room here. But what I'll say is you want to make sure that you have people that can be experts or be seen as having the correct expertise for every part of your process. If you're applying for phase 1, you need to have someone who's, if you're combining both of these, you need to have someone who's focused on neuroscience as their background. They understand the technology capabilities that are required for developing the solution in the neuroscience space. And then you also need to have somebody who is an expert in cybersecurity. I would encourage you to have 2 people that can show the expertise in either of these areas. An easy way to do that is to find someone who can, I say easy. Recruiting is never easy, right? Anyone who's done it knows that to be the case. But if you can find someone who can join your team contingent on you receiving the grant, then that you can add that person in. Maybe they're a consultant right now, and you get a letter of support or letter of intent from them saying, hey, if I win this award, you're going to jump into a part-time capacity to help with this, right? That could be an option. The STTR we haven't really talked about, because if you're not spinning out a company from a university, it's not often used. If you have filed your own IP, you've created the technology, there's no prior history of the technology being owned or being spun out of an academic lab, then STTRs are not normally considered. But if you're needing to improve the quality of your team, doing an STTR is a great fit. So let's talk about that. So the Small Business Technology Tech Transfer, research program is the program where you are applying as a for-profit entity, but you are working in conjunction with a nonprofit research institute, which could be a nonprofit lab, it could be an academic university, it could be any of those options where they are a not-for-profit group that is helping with the research. And generally speaking, you will find a principal investigator at a university who is interested in your project and willing to do the work alongside you. Now, the reason that's not often sought out is because there's questions around IP that are going to have to be discussed between you and the academic institution, the tech transfer office there. A lot of your budget is going to go towards not only the principal investigator at the academic institution, but they're also typically going to try to include their indirect rate into the grant as well. So the amount of funds that you'll actually receive will probably be less. But if you are really concerned about just getting that initial award, and especially if it's a phase 1, I think it's probably best just to have that validation of being awarded an SBIR grant. Then an STTR is a great way to improve your team and environment. Again, as stated by the NIH, not as huge of a focus as it has been in previous years, but something to keep in mind if you are looking to do that. So just as an example, we had a client, I think this was back in 2024. So even with the heightened concern around having a good team and environment, this individual was a solo founder and was able to find I think retired academic. So it wasn't an STTR, it was an SBIR that was provided a letter of support to come onto the project. And this was around hospital-associated infections. And so it had I don't even remember if it was a subject matter expert in this particular case, but it had someone with the necessary background in doing these types of studies provide a letter of support, a letter of intent to join the project. And they were a team of 2. They won the phase 1 award and went through with the project. So if you're a one-person team, I'd say you're halfway there to what we would probably recommend in terms of applying for an application like this. Great question. So I know we've got 10 minutes left here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Strategic Breakthrough Award. Now, this is not probably going to be the most interesting conversation if you have not applied for a phase 2 or secured a phase 2 in the past. However, if that's you and you haven't applied for phase 2 in the past or haven't received a phase 2, just take this as encouragement, because you can look at all of the effort that's going to go into applying and securing a phase 1 and phase 2 and think, wow, this is $2.3 million. It's going to take 3 years, 4 years for me to actually receive the funding and spend it. Is it really worth my time and effort? My overall, obviously I have an opinion in this that may or may not be fair, but even when I'm talking to investors, it's absolutely beneficial to go this route, really for all of the additional access that it gives you. We talked about the commercial readiness pilot, phase 2B we'll talk about here as well. We haven't even talked about phase 3 awards as you continue to seek out additional funding and contract opportunities. I'll talk about phase 3 at a super high level, but if you have even just a phase 1 SBIR, you are eligible for phase 3 contracts with the federal government. And the biggest shift is that these are phase 1, phase 2 grants that you're applying for. Phase 3 is a contract mechanism. It allows you to do contracting work with the federal government in a sole source arrangement where you do not have to compete for specific contract opportunities with the federal government or with other businesses in your area to receive a federal contract. So the best way I can explain this, if you are the VA, or let's talk about the Veterans Association, they are looking to start using a specific device to do intracranial pressure, which we have a good bit of experience with. Our client CranioSense, we won just over about $3 million through CDMRP, which is the Defense Health Agency award. It wasn't a phase 3, but it was a clinical trial funding opportunity. So let's just say the VA has a need to bring in devices to measure intracranial pressure, and they are looking for the best solution. A company like CranioSense, in this particular example, could go up to the VA, and they do have prior funding through SBIRs in the past, and say, hey, we want to work with you on this. Our technology is a great fit for you. We'd love to, basically sell you units when we're ready to do that. The VA could then say, great, we'd love to do that. We need to buy 100 units. This is the price that we're going to agree on. Great. That's going to go through the contracting officer. And generally speaking, the contracting officer has been encouraged and has been required to do a competitive bid process where they have to find, anywhere between 2, 3, 4 different solutions that they can do a competitive analysis on to figure out and often go with the most affordable option. With the phase 3 mechanism, you bypass that competitive bid process. You've already satisfied the competitive bid process requirement by securing the SBIR grant in your prior history. So even if you secure a phase 1, you have satisfied the competitive bid process for future federal contracting for the next 20 years. So regardless of whether it's NIH, NSF, DOW, NASA, whoever else, Department of Energy, as long as you have a technology that's been developed under a previous SBIR award, it has already satisfied the competitive bid process, and you can do sole source contracting through phase 3. So is applying for a phase 1 worth your time and effort? Absolutely. It's going to give you access to federal contracting, follow-on opportunities, and things along the lines. Generally speaking, we see companies specifically funded from NIH receive twice as much or invested in twice as much as the devices, therapeutic companies across the board that don't have SBIR funding, and their valuations are over 40% higher in those conversations because they've been validated, they've been tested, they've gone through scientific rigor, and they've been able to fund their early R&D with non-dilutive funding and without having to diluted some of their early research. So all that say, should you apply? Absolutely. Obviously, I have an opinion in this, but with some of the investors that I talk to that are on the dilutive side, they also encourage an application here as well. Strategic Breakthrough Awards are incredibly new. You can apply for this on September 5th if you are September 8th because of the holidays. If you're ready for that, great, go for it. If you're applying for January 5th, happy to have a conversation about this with our team to dive into this a little bit more. But they will fund up to $330 million for small businesses that have already completed a phase 2. So really important, you have to have previous phase 2 funding, and the end of the project has to be within its first 6 standard due dates, which is essentially a 2-year period of time. There's due dates for NIH every year, 3 times a year: January, April, September, January 5th, April 5th, September 5th. And so they'll have that. So if your project ended in 2024, in October of 2024, September 8th, 2026 is the last day that you'll be able to apply for the Strategic Breakthrough Award for this follow-on funding. So keep that in mind. Very important to know, especially if you're targeting this on when those requirements are going to be. Funding allowances and budget limits. So $30 million is kind of the standard price given to, and really it should be up to $30 million across all these different institutes or federal agencies at the most that they can give out. Department of War is probably going to use this budget in totality as they like to do. But you can see here that different groups like the National Cancer Institute has this at a $15 million budget. NHLBI has 4.5 million. NIAAA for alcohol abuse has 4.5 million. and then most other participating centers and institutes at $3 million. Okay, so keep that in mind if you're looking. This is incredibly helpful if you're doing. I'm not a regulatory expert, but phase 1 funding for a clinical trial should be relatively sufficient. So if you're using NCI to do later stage IND enabling studies through a phase 2 mechanism, maybe some really early first in human if you're a therapeutic, then actually doing a full-fledged phase 1 clinical trial for a strategic breakthrough award is possible. We have no idea how competitive this is going to be. My estimate approximately is very competitive, since this is such a high dollar amount, and we see that across the board through groups like Defense Health Agency as well. Okay, so this was posted on May 28th. You can start submitting as early as August 5th, which they're currently accepting applications similar to the parent announcement for NIH. And you can continue to submit that if you submit by September 5th. Just a quick note, if September 5th is the date that's legislated, but if it falls on a weekend or a holiday, it's pushed back, which is why, interchangeably speaking, we use September 5th and September 8th. September 8th is the official deadline, since as you look at your calendar, September 5th is Saturday, 6th is Sunday, the 7th is Labor Day, and then the 8th is the next business day. So September 8th is the official deadline. Same thing goes for January 5th and April 5th. Falls on a weekend and a holiday. I frankly don't remember if these do or not, just because we have about 60 applications going in September 5th or September 8th. So that's where my priorities lie. Registrations, all of that's going to be very similar to the SBIR program: Assist, grants.gov, sam.gov, ERA Commons. Some of these take time, specifically sam.gov. So make sure that you have that first. Okay. We got about 3 minutes here. Unless anybody has any other questions, I'll just kind of finalize and say, again, I represent BW&CO. We are a full-service grant writing firm that helps companies apply for NIH, Defense Health Agency, National Science Foundation. The way that we function is we meet with companies beforehand, do really early consultation, and we ask a lot of these questions. What is the technology? Why is it innovative? How far along is it? What sort of money are you seeking? Are you eligible? Are you a for-profit entity, fewer than 500 employees, primarily owned by U.S. citizens, permanent residents? If you are, great, we'll go through SBIR. If you're not, we'll find another mechanism that could be a good fit for you as well. But we're always looking for companies to apply for these types of mechanisms. Obviously, we have a full slate for September 8th. January 5th is coming up here in the next couple of months, and we're beginning to onboard companies and establish their projects here. All of the data shows that the longer you're working on your application before the submission deadline, the higher the likelihood of success you're going to have, because you're able to draft your specific aims, meet with the program officer, have ongoing correspondence, make sure you have all of your letters of intent, letters of support in line before submission, and you have all your ducks in a row so that you can submit on the deadline with no significant delays. So if you're looking to meet with our team, I put our scheduling link for some of our experts in the chat for you guys to reach out to. And you're welcome to ping me here on LinkedIn. RLH Wegner is the LinkedIn hashtag that you can reach me at. And yeah, would love to serve you guys as you continue to go after these applications. So submit your application, apply for phase 1, apply for your direct to phase 2. And if you're looking for support, let us know. Wish you guys the best of luck.